This is The Diversity of Me, Keeping It Real with me, Tanya Rai. In this episode, you will hear me talking to a guest who works in broadcast or the creative industries as they share their top 3 Keeping It Reals. But what does this mean, I hear you ask? Well, there is no single definition for keeping it real. It means all sorts of different things to all sorts of different people. What I do hope you find from these episodes is that they are informative, that they are of benefit to you, and that you can relate to the words that are spoken. My guest this week is Kathy Wigley. I met her at an international virtual event for creatives, and she was one of the speakers. I was immediately captivated by Kathy's presence as her good vibes came shining through the ether and warmed me. I know that sounds incredibly cheesy, but it's true. And as she was presenting with such charisma and wit, I just kept thinking, I need to get this woman on my podcast. And so here she is. Before we talk to Kathy, let me tell you about her career. She is the founder of Demarcation Films, a boutique production agency creating world-class internal comms and films for corporate clients. Over the last 6 years, they've made nearly 100 films for a range of high-profile global companies and brands, including Carlsberg, Pandora, AB InBev, Peroni, Cobham, SAB Miller, and 1664 Blanc. And over the last 5 years, Kathy has worked for clients based in the UK and Europe, but calls London home. She has also had 2 children whilst simultaneously running her business. She's been a very busy woman. Prior to setting up her own company, Kathy worked for 17 years producing and directing TV programmes for a range of global broadcasters, including BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, 5, Discovery, Channel 7 in Australia, HGTV in the US, and more. And she has extensive production experience in both the UK and Australia. Captivating Kathy. That's what I'm going to call you now. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to see you again.
And you, and thank you for joining me once again. So we had a pre-podcast chat even, and we inadvertently ended up doing the whole podcast, except we didn't record it. So it was a brilliant conversation, and I'm sure that we will recreate that energy that we sparked off each other then in this recording today. So let's get to talking about your Keeping It Reals, Kathy. And you told me that your first one is, if you're going to bother doing something that matters to you, do it well and do it to the best of your ability every time.
Yes. So I guess this is something it was really interesting when you asked the question about what are your 3 keeping it reals. And as you know, it took me a good couple of weeks to kind of mull it over and think about it. And I was thinking about how I live my life, whether that's intentional or unintentional, I suppose. And this came to mind because I guess I kind of think there's no point in living a life half lived. Like there's not much point in doing anything, whether it's work or doing something you love doing or trying to relax, but actually doing the dishes and doing the hoovering at the same time. Like if you're going to do something, throw yourself into it and live. It's part of kind of living life to the fullest, but it's also, there's no point in wasting your time and wasting other people's time by just kind of engaging with life or engaging with work half-heartedly, I suppose. And whether it's work and you're doing something you, excuse me, whether you're doing something you love doing, in which case you want to throw yourself into it, or whether you're in a situation, as every single job in the universe has sometimes, when you're having to do the bits that aren't as quite as interesting or that are taking you away from home or meaning that you have to work late, you should still throw yourself into that just as you throw yourself into something that you already know you love. And I guess one of the surprising things I found over the years is when I throw myself into something, even if I don't think in advance that I'm going to love it, if you're doing something wholeheartedly and with all of your engagement, actually life can surprise you sometimes as well, and you can find joy or um, unexpected learnings in unexpected places. But if you're only half engaged with whether it's work or life, you're probably going to miss out on an awful lot. Um, and it sort of makes me sound like a perfectionist, which I probably am to some extent, as much as I wish I wasn't. Um, and but there is a joy in doing things well, and there is a joy in immersing yourself in something, losing yourself.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think as well, it's all about the energy that you give out is what you get back in return. And I'm a firm believer in that. And especially as I've become older, and particularly actually in the last year, given everything that's been going on. And I think it's really important that anybody, it's difficult when things aren't going well and things aren't right, or things could be better, to keep having that mindset of doing your best and giving something your all. But I think, if anything, this last year has shown that kind of energy is 100% needed, or at least that's been my experience.
And I think it's really important for me to try and remember this in my downtime as well as in my professional time. And I think we're also easily distracted at the moment. And I catch myself doing it and I hate it. And I'll find myself making a coffee while simultaneously scrolling through the newspaper, or being out in the garden with the kids and looking at Instagram. And I guess part of what I'm trying to get to with this keeping it real is the idea of being present as well. There's an idea about not continually being distracted. And if I could, I would quite easily like bin the phone. But just like everybody else, I love, following all the kind of cool people I follow on Instagram, for a bit of distraction. It's so easy to get distracted nowadays. And I wish I was less distractible, I suppose, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. But the thing is, when we were talking before, you get up to all sorts. So it's really surprising that you end up getting so distracted, because there's so many different facets to your life that you're involved in. And I guess the other thing that we talked about too was, you touched upon it just now, but the perfectionism side of things. And do you feel that as you've become older, you're thinking less perfectionism and more just doing the best you can, and that doesn't have to be perfect?
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be perfect. That's completely right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I do take an inherent pride in doing something as well as it can be done, or as well as I'm capable of doing it. And whether that's so we've just moved back into our house again, after being away for a while. And so I'm looking at the garden, and at some point when we've got some spare cash and we've got the time and the energy, we'll probably get someone in to tear down the fence and redo a bit of the garden and tidy it all up again. But I can't sit there and look at this kind of messy, shabby, tired place without doing something about it. And my other half thinks I'm completely bonkers. He's like, just relax, just sit down, just don't worry about it. We're gonna rip it all out at some point. What's the point? But so the last couple of weeks in my spare time, I've borrowed the neighbour's jet washer, jet washed back this literally falling down old fence that's probably held together by 30 years of pollution, dirt, weeds, slime, basically. So power washed back this fence with my neighbour's jet washer, popped down to B&Q, spent 12 quid on a thing of fence paint. And now this horrible old shabby falling down green and grey garden fence is suddenly all kind of spruced up and a nice tidy grey again. And I'm like, yes, that was really worth it. I mean, the downside, I guess, to this is remembering to carve out some time to relax, because I am the world's worst potterer. like put me in a room and I will potter, and put my other half in a room and he will lie down and read the paper and watch a movie. And I'll be like, right, I'm just going to. So last night while he was lying down, I got a pair of secateurs out and it was almost dark, and I cut back these enormous bushes that are they look like kind of gigantic rhubarb that's fallen from Mars. So there's no flowers, there's no nothing. They're just completely taking up half the garden. And this is in the bit that we're going to rip out and do something with at some point. Anyway, so I sat there kind of pottering around, cut back these enormous bushes, dug it all up, raked it all over. And now there's where there was kind of falling down fence and everything's moldy and grey, moldy and horrible and brown and slimy with these great big bushes. Now we've got a nice neat flower bed, nice grey fence. I rescued a mirror that somebody put on the street, so I'm going to hang this mirror up again today. It's a beautiful 1930s vintage mirror, but the back is all mouldy. So I've repaired the back, going to stick it up in the garden, and bingo, we've got a beautiful garden space, whereas before it was all it was just annoying to look at, basically. And it is that thing about wanting to do my best, but also wanting to make a nice space, I guess, as well,
That's completely understandable as well. And well done you for recycling a cool 1930s vintage mirror. That sounds lovely. That does. As you were talking there, you know what I suddenly remembered? When you did the presentation at that event that I first met you at, and I think this anecdote falls quite nicely under this keeping it real. The one thing that stuck out to me was the way you told this story about working to the max and having just had your given birth and back to work when I don't think you just given birth, but your child was still breastfeeding. Do you remember that anecdote?
Yeah, God. This was just less than a year after I'd first set the company up. And so I set the company up, had a small child. I set the company up when my first child was 1. And I landed one tiny job, then I landed another tiny job, and then I got, so it was all very slow. And I was sitting there obviously filled with imposter syndrome and filled with self-doubt, wondering, oh my God, what on earth am I doing? Everyone else who I know who's had kids has gone back to work, and I'm sitting here trying to pursue this dream. And then I got pregnant with my second child. And about 2 months before I was due, I did a film for a new client. He'd seen something that I'd made for someone else and liked it. So I did a film for him, just a one-off thing. And he really liked it. And he came back to me a couple of weeks later, and I did this film, thought it'd be nice. Maybe he was a good contact further down the line. But he came back 2 or 3 weeks after that. So maybe 4 or 5 weeks before I was due to have my second kid, and said, hey, Kath, really loved working with you. I need 25 films made. Can you do this? And so honestly, without a second's hesitation, I went, yes, of course I can. That's totally marvelous. And that would be wonderful. And that would be all fabulous. Yes, of course, love to. And so we had all the contract negotiations and delivery schedule and worked all of that out. And so I signed the contract 3 weeks before having my second baby. Went into hospital, had a C-section in the end. And honestly, I was this crazy person sitting in the hospital the day after the C-section with a newborn baby on my tummy, basically sleeping, emailing the client going, hi, yeah, just me, just to let you know, everything's totally fantastic. Baby's great. I'm great. Looking forward to our first conference call in 10 days time. I mean, it might have been 2 weeks, but it was a ridiculously short period of time. Went home, got through the first week or two, and I was literally there back at work full time 3 weeks after having had my second baby, doing this thing.
Aren't you supposed to rest for 6 weeks after having a C-section?
Yeah,
isn't that the normal thing to do?
That would be the normal thing to do. This is correct. But I was just living. I knew, I had this absolute gut feeling that if I didn't take that, it was my first really big contract, and actually still it's the largest number of films I've delivered for one client in one hit. And off the back of that, so there was one main point of contact, but the films were for a number of different people within. It was for SAB Miller, and so I met a whole bunch of people, and several of them took me on with them subsequent to that. So They moved companies, they took me with them. That's how I ended up. So all of my work over the last 4 or 5 years has come pretty much from that one, saying yes to that one crazy job. And I would do calls with clients, and I'd be there, literally with, luckily he was a really, really good feeder. So I would have the baby tucked in the crook of my arm, and I'd be typing with both hands with his head resting on one inside one elbow while he breastfed. And then I would have to pause the typing, pick him up, burp him with the phone on speakerphone. And people would be like, oh gosh, what was that noise? I'd say, oh, I'm terribly sorry. That was the baby. I've just burped him. Just give me 1 second. Okay, we're settled again. Anyway, do continue. You were saying, and people would be like, oh, how old's the baby now? I'd be like, oh, he's 3.5 weeks now. And it was really funny because I kind of got to know these people as the months went on, because the job lasted nearly 5 months. And by the end of it, they all kind of had invested in this little kid who they'd just heard on the end of the phone. And I would send them pictures every now and again. They'd be like, oh, how old is he now? And I'd be like, oh, he's 4.5 months now. And they'd be like, oh gosh, I really feel like I've grown up with him. I'm like, yes, you have.
Oh my gosh, Kathy, so much respect for you. I mean, I'm in awe, because, sometimes I think, God, I'm running around like a silly mad woman, but I don't have the responsibility of another life. And gosh, I always feel so humbled by full-time working mothers like yourself, and more power to you. Honestly, I think it's wonderful that you took that opportunity with both hands, and I don't blame you for having taken it at all, because, as you say, it's led on to so much more work for you. So yeah.
And I was very lucky. I mean, the buzzword nowadays is all agile working from home and all the rest of it. I did the whole thing from home and employed. I was very, very lucky that a couple of TV people who I'd known for years and years and years, happened just by really good fortune to be available at that point. So I had a really great team of people, and I would do my 7 p.m. feed. I got 2 iPhones. Like, I got an old iPhone of my partner's, and I would watch the film at the end of every single day's edit. I would do a viewing at 7 p.m. I would watch the film on one hand, with the baby feeding in that arm, and make notes with my thumb, holding the other phone on the other one, so that I could then phone up at like 7:15, having put the baby to bed, and give them notes at the very end of the day to start on for the next morning. I mean, it was bonkers. It was absolutely bonkers. I would not want to go through that again. But I also kind of was aware that it was probably quite time limited. I just had to get my head down and do this as well as I possibly could. And it was nitpicky. There were a whole series of short films, and so the detail, because they're for a corporate client, that every single shot. It's interesting. I've learned a lot along the way. It's a kind of different skill set to making longer form stuff, which is what I was doing. And every single shot had to be perfect. Luckily, I'm quite anally retentive by nature, so it worked.
That's a good skill. That's a good skill. And actually, you've already said this, but just to reiterate, that you were already fully immersed in remote working years before the new kind of norm that we're living in now. So I guess the pandemic, whilst would have been disconcerting and worrying for everyone, yourself included, in terms of your workflow in your professional capacity, nothing really changed much.
No, because I was already set up. So I've work has significantly dropped. And I'm hoping now that we're through the worst of it, please God. I'm hoping now that things seem to be taking a turn for the better, that work will pick up again. I actually finished a film on the first day of homeschool. And I delivered the film to the client, and they were showing it. And they suddenly realised that when they had downloaded it at their end, their download had cut out halfway through. And so there was a glitch on their thing. And I remember having the kids, maybe it was like a day or two into the homeschooling. So the kids are like, Mummy, where's my glue and my scissors for the whatever it was? Or, Mummy, I want some chocolate. And I was like, okay, that's totally fine. I'll just get the editor to re-export it and blah, 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 blah. Then madly phoning my editor who, stop whatever you're doing. We need to get another cut of the film to the client within the next 45 minutes. So when that happens, and people are doing big presentations and stuff, and the kids were at home, it was, you're kind of this awful kind of, 2 hours of heart pumping on the adrenaline. But yeah, home working it's a weird bag. I was quite lonely at first because I was used to working in a great big team of people. So that was a struggle. It was kind of, I didn't know what to do with myself. And I think the danger is that you fall into overwork. And so if you're working in an office, you would probably do some work and then maybe go and get a cup of tea. Someone else might come and see that you're getting a cup of tea and come and have a chat for 5 minutes, or you might pop out and go and get a sandwich for lunch or go for a walk around the block, but you would probably carve out at least 15 minutes at some point, maybe a couple of times a day, to just reset. And one of the things I've really had to watch doing the whole agile working, generally I've been working with remote editors as well the last couple of years. And the temptation is to work all morning. Then instead of going for a nice walk and getting a sandwich, I'd put on the washing, make the kids dinner, tidy the house, vacuum the house, work again, and then fold the washing, put the washing away, and then pick the kids up, have mummy time, play with the kids, go to the park, make dinner, put the kids to bed. And then I would always work probably 7:38 until midnight quite often if I was busy. And so I think that's something that women in particular with caring responsibilities have to be very mindful of, is that you don't just end up being on this treadmill of running life, running the children, running work, and then actually at the end of the day, there's literally nothing that you've done all day to give yourself any kind of space or calmness or quiet time.
Have you been making time for that in the last year or so? I mean, it sounds like because work had dropped a little bit, then perhaps you would have done.
Yeah, so once the kids were back at school, things were a lot quieter. And then, once I'd stopped worrying about when the next job was going to come, that was great. That was like recharge time. So I was probably doing what everyone else around the world was doing in between, fretting about stuff and trying to be outside, trying to go for nice walks, get out into nature, obviously doing stuff that didn't really involve seeing that many other people, and definitely not indoors. But yeah, I'm getting better at it. At the beginning, and when I'm busy, everything else just drops off. That's it. And it would be lovely. My mission, I guess, looking forwards, is to find a balance, hopefully, because work has tended to come in big bursts and then there'll be nothing, and then there'll be big bursts. So when it's busy, like the last really busy period I had, so not last year, but the year before, at one point I was delivering 16 different films for 4 different clients, and all the delivery dates were in about 4 days of each other or 3 days of each other. And so that was crazy. I had like edits running all over the place, like 12 films to one client, 3 films, I can't remember the numbers, but 10 here, 3 there, 2 there, 1 there or something, and that was bonkers. But then I didn't work for 2 months, and then so it would be my mission in life at some point is to try and find a regular flow of work, so it's spaced out, rather than everything tending to clump together around conference seasons or summer or beginning of Q4 or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's the business life / freelance life, though, isn't it? Actually, because that I relate to that when I've been freelancing. That you get those periods where all of a sudden everybody wants a piece of you, and then it's 2-3 months of nothing, and then you kind of sit there going, "Oh dear." when's the next contract coming through? Everybody I've reached out to, all of my contacts don't have anything for me. I don't know what's going to happen next. But then something always comes out of the bag. And the good thing about running your own business or being freelance is that you set an agreed rate or price, and it's a good solid amount that will kind of help you through financially through those periods where you get the peaks and the troughs.
The holy grail of freelancing, isn't it? Trying to find a happy balance between intensity and spacing it out, basically. I would love to find a way to make that work, but I think millions of other freelancers would also feel the same.
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about your second Keeping It Real now. And this one you said was find the fine line between self-belief and arrogance.
Yes. So this is my constant internal voice when I'm working, particularly now I'm working for myself. And so I guess it would say, to kind of elaborate on that, I would say it's trying to cultivate a mental space that is a balance of humility and a willingness to learn with a belief that you can achieve your goals. So it's excuse me, it's not being sloppy, and not being sloppy, but also believing that you can do it. So again, we come back, I guess, to imposter syndrome. So that constant thing of, God, I need to prove myself is probably what partly keeps me in check. So that would then mean that I check things twice, 3 times. Have I done this? Have I done that? Is everything okay? And there's that constant voice in my head, don't get too cocky. But at the same time, particularly about if I'm pitching to clients or if I rock up to a meeting and somebody asks me something that I have absolutely no idea what the answer is, it's like, yes, of course we can do that. Absolutely no problem at all. And internally, I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? But, so it's, yes, I can do it. Yes, I will find a way to achieve it. But at the same time, not letting that, yes, I can do this, turn into something that then means I produce work which is of a lower quality because I haven't checked it properly. I've taken my eye off the ball.
And I think most business owners will be able to relate to that, and freelancers actually, particularly in the creative sector, but in any sector, I suppose, that, Richard Branson says it all the time. Not that I advocate Richard Branson or anything like that, but, say yes and then worry about it later. And I don't think that that's arrogance, as you say. It's just kind of going, right, I'm going to take this opportunity with both hands, and I will find a way. And I wonder as well whether it's more of a, not that I want to kind of genderize this in any way or shape or form, but with women, that concern about coming across as being complacent or arrogance is always at the back of our minds, I think, and always wanting to show that we're worth our salt.
Yeah, I read a really great blog recently. I'll have to dig it out, but it was talking about if you are at the table, you have earned your place at the table. And I really like that idea that actually, if you are wherever you are, if you're in a client meeting, if you're in a production, if you're going to the channel to pitch an idea for the first time, if you're doing anything that matters, if you've been invited to speak somewhere, you have earned that place at the table. So feel confident about taking up that space. And I think it's difficult. I think probably girls nowadays are given much more overt, you belong wherever you want to be. Now I'm in my mid-40s. My generation were absolutely not given that, and I think it's probably, I hope that girls of a younger generation are coming up feeling a bit more empowered and a bit more confident about those things than sometimes maybe women of my generation have felt. And now whether or not that turns out to be true or not, I don't know. And obviously, I don't want to generalize. Obviously, there's women of my generation who probably managed to leave all of that behind. I think for me as well, the leap between working for someone else and then working for myself was a massive leap. And at the beginning, it was quite frightening because, say, if I was making a film for whoever, there was always that little bit in the back of my mind that if you'd done something that wasn't quite right, somebody else was always there to check it and to make sure that you hadn't made a mistake, or that the voiceover had pronounced somebody's name properly, or that everything was spelled correctly. And when it's just me, at the beginning, I was kind of looking over my shoulder, I'm like, my God, who am I going to get to check this? And then suddenly there's this realization that, oh my God, I'm the one who has to do all, and that was like, right, that sort of feeds back into it links into the first one, that I want to do this to the best of my ability. And trying to believe, knowing that I can do it. I'm a lot better now at kind of quashing the imposter syndrome. Oh my God, at the beginning, I was like rocking up to client meetings. No idea, I knew I could make films or programs, but in terms of navigating the kind of corporate world, I was totally green at that. I'd never done it before because I'd always worked in broadcast. And it is just repeated exposure to it, I guess, and having to do it again and again and again. And now I'm much more comfortable. But at the beginning, I didn't even have anything suitable to wear because I'd always worked in TV. And, we rock up wearing 100% of the time, I would wear trainers, or sometimes in the winter, you might wear boots. Or in the summer, you might wear sandals or something if you're working on it in an office. And so when I started working for myself, I was literally, one of the first things I had to do was go shopping and buy like a couple of business shirts, some really smart trousers. I didn't own a smart pair of trousers or a suit. I've literally never worn a suit. And now I've got this kind of, I have my very small section of my wardrobe, which is meeting clothes, and I'm a bit more savvy now, I guess, than I was when I started out. I kind of went and panic bought a mini smart wardrobe at the beginning. And now if I see something really nice, totally classic, that will never date in the sales, I'll pick it up. And even if I don't wear it for a year, I will then wear it for a client meeting, and I haven't wasted £100 on it. I've spent 30 or something, and now obviously all the time, everything's done via Zoom at the minute anyway. So as long as I've got a nice clean shirt or a smart jumper, I'm fine, just as long as I don't stand up, because then people can see my pajamas. Joke, I know.
Yes, Kathy's clients, she does not wear pajamas in your meetings, or slippers.
Don't tell anyone.
I wanted to touch on something that you had said earlier on in under this Keeping It Real, and just because I think it's a really important point, and the fact that the younger generation of women, I think, do have it overtly told to them about what imposter syndrome is, so that they recognise it. Because I hadn't even heard of imposter syndrome until, do you know what? It's not come into my consciousness until 3 years ago, as recent as that for me.
I think you're probably even more enlightened than me. I knew I was probably suffering it, but I hadn't even heard the phrase probably until about 18 months ago or 2 years ago. And I was like, oh God, there's this moment of the penny dropping. And I was like, wow, that is the name for what you feel, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm in my late 30s. I've got to say late 30s now. I've been saying mid 30s for ages, but it's late 30s now. And I'm in that kind of bracket as you, that grown up with this social conditioning of, where a woman's place is, particularly since I'm of South Asian origin in terms of my heritage. And I have to say that my background is steeped in patriarchy, is steeped in misogyny, and it's even more in your face as a South Asian woman, I believe. And I think to an example of one of my friends who works in a senior position for a broadcaster, and she was saying to me that her team of 21, 22-year-olds are very much like, well, equal playing field. Well, yeah, that's how it should be. she happened to say something along the lines of, I'm very lucky that I've got my husband who helps me. And one of the young women in her team said, Bethan, it's not about being lucky. It's about that's how it should be. There's no luck in that. It's you should have a loving husband who takes his responsibilities seriously and does things equally. That should just be a given. But it was interesting how she kind of explained it as, oh yes, I'm really lucky that I've got a really supportive husband. And I think that's important for everyone to be aware of, that when you're starting out family life, when you're starting in a relationship, that's what it should be grounded in, is you're both kind of leaning against each other and propping each other up, and it's an equal amount of strength. Would you agree with that?
I think it's absolutely. And I so recognise the anecdote that you're saying about, oh, I'm really lucky that my husband helps me, or I'm really lucky that my partner helps me. I think for women of my generation, it does feel partly like luck, because particularly like and I'm going to make a sweeping generalization here, so forgive me, but I think also that if we're talking about the internal narratives that girls and young women of our generation absorbed or had to fight against, I think absolutely going back 30, 40, 50 years or whatever, boys of that generation were absolutely not brought up being told, you have to help do the dishes, you have to do XYZ, you have to help fold the washing, you have to do this, and even all the representations, the very gendered representations of a man's role and a woman's role that we all grew up with on TV, on adverts. Think about things like the Bisto adverts from the 1980s, or Ready Breck adverts, or whatever. It's always the mum in the kitchen, the kids eating, the dad's coming home from work and giving the wife a kiss and hanging his hat up, and and okay, we've moved on since like the 1960s with the floral aprons and hello darling, how was your day? But those are the culturally generated narratives that, again, incredibly patriarchal, without people even realizing. But I do hope and think things have changed. I'll never forget, God, this is showing my age now, but going back, probably back in 2000, and I'd just directed my first film for BBC Two, and then I went travelling in Australia for nearly a year, and I was trying to get work in Sydney when I first arrived, and I remember rocking up to a job interview at a small production company, and there's this middle-aged guy interviewing me, and so there was a lot of they didn't like young female directors, and especially not young pom directors. They didn't particularly like the Brits in those days. And I was all full of, I've just done this film for BBC Two, and I've been working in music and arts, and yada yada yada, and full of enthusiasm. And he turned around and I'm like, yeah, well, that's all very well and good. What I'm really interested in to know is, what do you like best, opening the post or making tea? At which point I was just like, I really don't think this is the job that I'm looking for. I was so angry. I sort of very politely sort of brought it short, because it was obvious that he was kind of being deliberately provocative and putting me down, because he thought I was jumped up, basically. I think, who is this young girl? Who does she think she is? And I walked out and I was shaking with anger, just like, oh my God. But that's the kind of thing that women have had to fight against, and we all stand on the shoulders of the women who've gone before us. Every single one of those battles hopefully helps the women who come after you, but God, it's hard sometimes.
And what a thing to have said. Oh my God, that's wound me up. Like, what do you like best, opening the post or making tea? Oh, sod off.
I mean, people get far worse. People get far, far, far worse, right? I mean, that was mild compared to what a lot of people get.
Well, yeah, but also, have you watched Captain America? God, not Captain America, Mrs. America. Mrs. America.
I thought you were going to say Captain Underpants. That's the kind of thing that I get to watch nowadays with two small boys.
No, God, oh gosh. I sound so silly having just said that, but you know what? I'm going to keep it in. I'm not going to edit it out. But Mrs. America with Kate Blanchett. Have you seen that on BBC on the iPlayer? Okay, I'm not going to say any more. Watch that, because to see what those women went through when they were trying to instigate the Equal Rights Act in America, and it's just an eye opener, the kind of things that they had to put up with because of being a woman, and what they had to let men do to them or say to them to get a meeting in or be listened to. It's fascinating. So I'd recommend you watch that.
You see it on Twitter every day, female MPs getting shot down and torn to pieces by virtue of the fact that they're speaking out as women and challenging the status quo. As far as we've come, I think we've still got a long way to go in some respects. The fight goes on, sisters.
Yes, hell yes, it does. It does. Keeping it real, number 3 now. And you said that was Feed Your Soul. I love this one.
Again, these are, I'm realizing now, doing this chat with you, these are all my kind of mental notes to self, effectively. Feed your soul. Do find some time to do things that make you happy. And again, looping back to where we started, without being on the phone, without taking 100 photographs to put on Snapchat or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or blah, 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 whatever it may be. Be present, be intentional. And I think, given all the lockdowns and the lack of travel and not seeing anybody, now that thing that we all used to take for granted so much about just seeing friends and family, so precious and appreciated when you can't do that. But even things like getting out into nature, being under the sky. One of the things I'm really into is stargazing. And a couple of times a year, there's great big meteor showers that come over Earth. And one of them is in August. So last year, I'd been watching the sky and watching these things come over. There's a period of about 3 weeks when the Earth passes through the dust of a comet. And so you see all these hundreds of tiny shooting stars. There's really good ones in January. There's really good ones in August. There's really good ones. There's some in November, but I've never seen any in November. And so I dragged 2 friends last summer, and we went down to a beach, and it was quite dark, and it was cold. It was not like Club Tropicana, grass skirts and music playing. We were in Denmark, and we lay on this beach outside Copenhagen in the freezing cold, wrapped in blankets, took a bottle of wine, and lay sort of on our backs and then propped up on our elbows and just watched shooting stars come over on this clear sky. And it was amazing. We'd be chatting there, and then someone would go, and you'd see streak, 10 degrees across the sky, great big fireball. And then there'd be chat, 10 minutes later, look, streak. And then, it's just extraordinary. It's absolutely lovely. I cannot recommend it enough. I did it in January of last year as well, in the freezing cold. I do not recommend that. I thought the children would find it amazing, and the meteor shower was hitting really quite early. It was hitting about 6 p.m. at 20 degrees on the horizon. So I found this place where you could see 20 degrees above the horizon to the west. So you can't have any trees or hills or anything on the way. Worked it all out. Went down to the edge of this lake. I think it was like January the 2nd or 3rd or something. I can't remember. It was super early January, freezing cold, howling gale. Of course, the kids, I went with a friend and their kids as well. And the kids just thought it was hysterical, ran round, trying to kick a football, nearly falling into the lake. And we were literally there wrapped in blankets, drinking hot chocolate. And my friend saw an amazing meteor. It was a cloudless night, but windy and cold. It's much nicer doing it in August.
I bet, but still, what a wonderful thing to do. And as you were saying that, I had my hand on my heart, because I just felt that was, what a wonderful thing to see and do. And at a beach as well. The beach is my favourite place. So, I absolutely love that anecdote. And I think there's a lot to be said about our home, planet Earth, and the fact that we have this abundance of nature, animals, and wonderful natural world. I can't even articulate myself properly, but you know what I'm getting at. And I say abundance. I know that actually what we're doing to our planet and how we're living is not doing it any good, but we have so much fantastic nature in terms of trees, grass. You don't have to go far to find it and seek it. And I think it's healing, isn't it? It's healing when you're out in nature.
That's partly why I put feed your soul rather than just make sure you take time out for yourself to recharge your batteries, because you can do that. But I guess this is much more about intentionality. And again, I keep coming back to it. I sound like a broken record, sorry, but being present, carving out time to feed your soul like you would cook yourself a nice meal. I know when we were talking before in our pre-podcast chat, I was telling you about my love of Birmingham, but I went to Birmingham University and had these lovely, lovely, lovely times wandering around the old markets before they knocked them all down and built this lovely, fancy shopping centre there instead in the Bullring. But that was another way of feeding my soul. I would go and just potter by myself generally. And I've always loved music, and there would all inevitably be amazing people selling vintage records, generally for 50p, maybe £1. And I was a student at the time, so £1 always felt quite expensive. If you're lucky, you'd get a record for 20p sometimes. Sometimes I would buy them, and oh my God, sometimes they would be awful. They would go straight on the street for someone else to give a home to if you didn't know what they were. But I bought Shaka Khan vinyl there, and God, all sorts of amazing original stuff. And that was lovely. It was just taking time out very intentionally. It doesn't have to be some amazing, climbing a glacier or whatever, but just to do stuff that makes you fulfilled. And actually, sorry, just I read this really interesting article yesterday or the day before, talking about how mobile phones are actually impacting our ability to form memories now. And somebody's just done the first clinical study on how heavy use of social media impairs people's long-term memory. And so when people are never, ever, ever actually letting go of their phones and living in the moment, but they're continually, like, for example, on New Year's Eve, this is the example they gave, one of the examples they gave in the article, but somebody being with their boyfriend on New Year's Eve, and she's there counting down, 5, 4, and she turns around and sees her boyfriend who's live streaming it on Facebook and looking at his phone rather than looking at her and being in the moment and kissing everyone, But somebody has actually now done a study talking about that looks into how heavy phone use, when you're always taking yourself out of the moment and thinking, oh, I should go do an Instagram live, or I should do a Facebook live, or I should put this on my story, I should put this on Snapchat, and you go ping, 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 ping. Actually, when you ask people 6 months later, a year later, to describe what happened, the only thing they can really remember is the photograph, if they can remember anything at all, because stepping out of that moment does something to your brain circuitry, and it actually prevents the formation of long-term memories. And so they're testing people's memories pre-heavy mobile phone use and now. And people's memories from, say, 2010 or 2015 are much more vivid and embedded than memories from, say, 2018 or 2019, when by that point everybody just about had a smartphone and was taking photos constantly, which I think is really interesting. And I think being present for me definitely means putting tech away.
I think that's fascinating, but it also doesn't surprise me one bit that, what you've just said there hasn't made me go, oh, really? It's actually gone, oh, I'm not surprised, because there are so many people I see all the time. And I remember actually when I went traveling, and this was 2014, and wherever I would go, I had a little Sony RX100 camera, so I wasn't using my smartphone to take photos. So I was being really thoughtful about the kind of photos I wanted to take, and thinking about the composition and what shutter speed I was going to use and what aperture, and was I going to kind of create a bouquet, as I say, so you as you will probably know, you focus in on the subject in the foreground, and the background is out of focus. And I remember people just kind of pushing me out the way, because they'd see the photo that I was trying to take, and they want to get that photo on their smartphone and immediately put it on social. And it was just like, oh my God, I'm just trying to take in this moment of being able to formulate this photograph. And how rude of you to just come barging in. But also the other thing that I noticed, and not so much on my travels in Asia, but the odd holiday here and there in Europe, particularly in museums and things. I remember going to Paris and looking forward to seeing the Mona Lisa. It was going to be my first time in the Louvre, and wanting to see the Mona Lisa. And I was in awe of all of the other fantastic paintings that were there, and paintings that people never talk about. And you just think, why is nobody talking about this photo? And the Mona Lisa, I'm not disparaging the Mona Lisa in any way, but in comparison, these big, massive pieces of art that are just awe-inspiring, right opposite the Mona Lisa. Nobody's taken any notice of those. But, I thought, I'm here, I want to see the Mona Lisa. I was the only person not taking a photo.
Yeah, it's crazy, huh? It's totally, totally crazy. And then you see people at concerts, and when you see the wide shots of crowds now, nobody's actually there doing it. Everyone's there with their phones in the air, looking at their phones.
Yes, and there's a pop star. Oh gosh, don't lose respect for me about what I'm going to say, Kathy. But there's a pop star called Niall Horan, who's from One Direction. I don't I don't follow One Direction, but I do have a soft spot for Niall Horan, even though he's like 10 years my junior. But let's not dwell. Not what's the word I'm looking for?
Dwell on that.
Dwell, yeah, that's the word. Let's not dwell on that. But he was saying that if you're going to come to my concert, I want you to put your phones away, because I actually think he was saying it's a bugbear of mine. I think it's rude. I know you want to remember the night. I know you want to take snapshots of it, and I don't mind that. But to constantly have your phone on throughout the whole performance, I want you to be there.
Yeah, exactly. It breaks that intimate moment.
Yes, it absolutely does. And I think I am on social media, and I do use Instagram. And yes, when I do go out, I am thinking, right, I'm not necessarily thinking, oh, I want to be able to take a photo tonight, but it'll be, if I happen to see a nice photo, then I'll post it on Insta. But that's not my main aim. But even that kind of wriggles at me a little bit, that I'm even thinking about the fact that, if I happen to see a nice photo, then I am going to put it on Insta, and I do this thing at the beach, though, that really, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but if you're on the seashore and your feet's in the waves, just on the shore, and in the winter I always wear my wellies because my feet will just get absolutely freezing. But I make sure I go in the water, and I just look out into the sea. And if you look from a certain perspective, stay absolutely still, and you just look out on the horizon, and you watch the waves coming in. And as you watch the waves coming in, it feels like you're sliding. And I call it still surfing. I don't know if you've ever done that, but
No, I haven't. I can totally picture what you're saying though, and that's awesome. I'm going to try that.
I would thoroughly recommend it. It's my most favorite thing ever, and it just the feeling, it's bizarre. You actually do feel like you're sliding on the water, and you feel that movement because it's all about that perception and the perspective that you're looking at. And with the waves coming in, you're really concentrating and really focusing, and that's kind of like a form of meditation for me because I've said it before on a previous podcast episode that I do struggle to meditate, but when I do that, everything else leaves my mind, and
And
it's amazing.
that is the feeding your soul. You should try real surfing one day too. Go somewhere nice and hot and hop on a surfboard because it's amazing.
I don't think I can surf. Do you know what? I shouldn't say that, should I? I shouldn't say, oh, I don't think I can do it. I should try it. I should try it and
Nobody can
see.
do it. Nobody can do it until you get taught. You go if you're next time you're traveling or you're away or whatever, if you get the opportunity. I was living in Australia and a friend of mine went to Bali for a holiday and they had surf school there. So we did surf school. And at the beginning, somebody holds the surfboard for you basically in these big waves and you clamber on really clumsily and then, stand up for 1 second and splash into the water. But it doesn't matter because the water's warm, it's lovely. But we did this all week. And at the end, we were like, woo! Obviously, if I got on one now, I'd probably fall straight on my face. But it's worth giving the real one a go if you get the opportunity. I mean, it's hard, but it's brilliant fun.
Do you know what? I'm gonna consider doing that. Absolutely, I will. Kathy, it's been an amazing chat, and I've loved it so much. Thank you for agreeing to come onto my podcast from when I asked you as being a complete and total stranger to you, and I feel like actually. I feel like we're going to be friends. I want to be friends, Kathy.
We can be friends. I would love that.
Thank you. You take care.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
I truly hope that you have enjoyed listening to this episode of The Diversity of Me, Keeping It Real with me, Tanya Rai. If you did, please do take the time out to rate, review and follow, only because it helps other people find this podcast more easily. And if you have enjoyed it and found it beneficial, then maybe somebody else will too.